Recently, I received a question about how I served such a lengthy sentence in federal prison and where I served that time. And rather than just talking about it, I thought it would be helpful to show you. So I brought this picture of the Bureau of Prisons website. You can see it right here. And if I go to the locations, you can actually see a map of our locations. And if I make this a little bit bigger, let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. Can I make it any bigger than that? That's as big as I can get. You can see all of the places where they have different institutions. So I started serving my sentence on August the 11th, 1987, when I was arrested, and I was locked inside of the Metropolitan Detention Center. No, it's called the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Miami. Today, that's the Federal Correctional Institution in Miami. Back then, that was the actual correctional center for pretrial people. And that's where I began serving my sentence. I was only there for maybe a week, maybe less than 2 weeks for sure, just to go through judicial processes and have the judge deny me access to bail. And then authorities loaded me in buses and took me to a U.S. Marshal's plane. And we flew over here to the Federal Transit Center. And at that time, it was someplace in here in Oklahoma. I was only there for a couple of days, as I recall, and then they were actually transporting me back to Seattle to stand trial, but they always take the circuitous route. And so I ended up going to Phoenix, where I spent a couple of days, and then they ultimately took me up here to Seattle, where I remained for about a year. And while I was there for about a year, I was going to trial actually in Tacoma, Washington, and I made a lot of bad decisions at that point in my life. I was 23 and sitting in the jail and never having been confined before. I didn't quite know what I was going to do with my life, but I really just wanted to get out of prison. And of course, it didn't turn out that way. I went to trial. I committed perjury on the stand. I got indicted again while I was in the jail because the scheme was ongoing. I was still trafficking in drugs, or the organization was still trafficking in drugs. So I just made a series of really bad decisions that put me in a bad spot. And I got sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. But while I was there, I had this shift in mindset that I was going to change my life. And that occurred before I got sentenced. So I got sentenced to 45 years, and I already had a very clear vision that I was going to do something better with my life. And then they transferred me out, and the first place I went was back to Oklahoma, where I was waiting to get designated. And I was probably there for about, I was there for a good month, and maybe longer. And I don't remember actually how long I was there. I'm going to guess it was about a month. And then authorities designated me to the United States Penitentiary in Atlanta. So now I'm using a different color. And to get to Atlanta, I had to go through Talladega, Alabama. And I was there for a little while at that place in Alabama. So every time I transfer, I'm going to try and change the colors. I'm colorblind, but maybe you could follow along with this. I went from Talladega, Alabama to Atlanta. And that is right up here. Oops. I don't want to do that. I want to start a brand new one. And so I went there to Atlanta, Georgia. And then from Atlanta, Georgia, I started serving my sentence. And I was there for a pretty long time. That's kind of really where I started my journey. I had a productive journey inside of the penitentiary. It was a violent prison, but I'd learned to adjust to it pretty well. I didn't have any problems there at all. In fact, I got my undergraduate degree and started working toward my master's degree while I was there. I began this really disciplined path of making progress. All that, of course, is really well documented in my book, Earning Freedom, and probably in several of the books, but mostly in Earning Freedom. Oh, and also in Inside Life Behind Bars in America. From Atlanta, I went up here to Pennsylvania. That was my first medium security prison. And I was there, that's like 70 miles south of Buffalo, New York, in western Pennsylvania. And I was there for perhaps, I would say, about 18 months or so. And that's where I got my master's degree. So let's try and change colors here again. And I'll take this color. But while I was there was a riot that broke out in like 1990. I don't remember, 95, maybe 96, somewhere in there. And then they transferred people, and I was one of the people who got transferred. So I went from McKean, Pennsylvania to Fairton, New Jersey, another medium security prison. And I was in the Fairton prison for a relatively short period of time, actually, because my security level dropped again. And when my security level dropped, I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, which is right here, I guess, just like pretty close. So I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey. I was there for about 8 years. That's where I really began my career as a published writer. And I began writing a lot of books. I wrote about prison in Fort Dix, New Jersey. Oh, I had that era of the stock market that I wrote about, Earning Freedom, where I made a lot of money in prison. And then I began publishing a lot. I wrote about prison. And it was through that work, I think, that I met my wife, Carol, got married there in Fort Dix, New Jersey. And then I wrote profiles from prison there. And then I began to write Inside Life Behind Bars in America. But just as I was writing the book proposal for that, my security level dropped again. And so they transferred me back to the Philadelphia Detention Center, where I stayed maybe a month. And then I went from there to back to Oklahoma, where I stayed for another month, waiting to go to my first minimum security camp, which is right down here in Florence, Colorado. And then I was in Florence, Colorado for about 18 months, and that's where I got my deal to write Inside Life Behind Bars in America. It was the first minimum security camp where I was confined. I was there for perhaps, like I said, 18 months, I think. And then they transferred me again. And this time they transferred me over here to, did I just go straight or did I go through El Reno again? Yeah. No, I think I went straight to California. Did I go straight to, I don't remember if I went through El Reno again. Probably did. But in any event, I ended up at Santa Barbara, California. And I was there at the prison called Lompoc. I was at Lompoc for about 18 months. And then Inside came out, and I was writing a lot of books in Lompoc, but Inside came out, and that resulted in me getting transferred again to Bakersfield. And so I came over here to Bakersfield area, which is like in the Central Valley. And I was there for 5 years. I stayed there. I was productive there. That's where I started really publishing a lot of my own books. And I wrote Earning Freedom. Well, a lot of books for other people. But I wrote Earning Freedom, Prison My 8,344th Day, Triumph, The Straight A Guide. And then I ghost wrote books for other people, which was great because it allowed me to earn a pretty good income while I was in prison. And then as I came to the end of my journey, they transferred me one more time, and I went up here to the Bay Area, well, Central Valley, I guess, still, Atwater, California, where I served the final year of my sentence. And that was my 25th year. And then just as I finished up, they transferred me for the final time. We'll make that one black. And I got released actually from Atwater, and Carol picked me up there at the minimum security camp, and she drove me over here to the halfway house in San Francisco, which is where I finished 9,500 days in prison. And so that was the entire journey. So it was a productive journey, but a long journey, as you can see, took me through a lot of spots, prisons of every security level. So I learned a great deal, met a lot of people, had a productive time. And I began my journey after prison teaching there. I taught at San Francisco State University. And then I moved from San Francisco down here to Orange County, California. How do I do that? Do another one. Move down here, which is like right just before San Diego. And I now live down here in Dana Point, Laguna area. And that's the whole journey, buddy. So I hope that answers your question of where I served all my sentences and how I served them. If you want to find out where you would serve a sentence, you might take a look at the Bureau of Prisons. If you're still out, you could look at this website here. It's at bop.gov. You can just go here to locations. You can see a map of the facilities. If you want a more specific area, you can see this. It's really grown a lot since I started. When I started my prison term, there were only 30,000 people in federal prison. And of course, our nation's commitment to mass incarceration has led to a much bigger population. That's what I wanted to share with you today. I hope that you are a subscriber to Prison Professors, but we're also using this to teach and inspire people who are in jails and prisons across America. Thanks.